They thought stealing his billion-dollar empire would be easy once they had him declared insane. Richard Blackstone built Blackstone Industries from nothing. 72 years old. 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 47 years of blood, sweat, and ruthless business decisions. What he wanted was simple: to pass his legacy to those who deserved it. What stopped him was equally simple. His own children saw him as an obstacle, not a father. But Richard Blackstone hadn't survived the corporate world for 5 decades by being naive about human nature, especially when that nature wore a familiar face. The mahogany door to his study stood slightly ajar. Richard sat perfectly still in his leather chair, the evening newspaper folded in his lap. Through the crack, voices drifted from the living room. His children thought he was napping. They were wrong about many things. Marcus spoke first, his voice carrying that familiar entitled edge. The old man's losing it. Yesterday he forgot my name twice. Called me Michael. Perfect timing. Patricia's voice was smooth, calculating. Always the strategist. I've already spoken to Dr. Morrison about the competency evaluation. He's very understanding about these family situations. David's voice came quieter, uncertain. Are we really doing this? I mean, what if he's just having bad days? David. Marcus's tone sharpened. He's worth $2.8 billion. We can't wait for nature to take its course. Mother's been gone 3 years. There's no one else to protect him from making poor decisions. Like giving everything to charity? Patricia laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Or worse, to Emma just because she visits him twice a week. Richard's hands remained steady on the newspaper. His breathing stayed even. His mind was perfectly clear, had been clear every moment of the past 6 months. The confusion, the forgotten names, the repeated questions. All performance, all testing. Now he had his answer. His children weren't concerned about his well-being. They were conducting an estate planning meeting. Without him. About him. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 8 times. Richard had bought that clock 43 years ago when Marcus was 2. He'd dreamed then of family dinners, of teaching his children about business, about integrity. Instead, he'd raised 3 adults who saw his potential incapacity as a business opportunity. But they had underestimated him in the most fundamental way possible. They thought age had made him weak. In reality, it had made him patient. 3 weeks later, Richard called Marcus to his office at Blackstone Industries, the corner office on the 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Richard had helped build. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, checking his phone as he entered. Sorry, Dad. Traffic was brutal. No traffic in the world could excuse 15 minutes of lateness from a 20-minute drive. Marcus had been gambling again. Richard knew because he'd hired investigators months ago. Son, I'm confused about some numbers. Can you help me review the quarterly reports? Richard made his voice slightly uncertain, added a tremor he didn't feel. Marcus's expression shifted, the kind of smile a predator makes when it sees wounded prey. Of course, Dad. You know you can trust me to handle anything that's troubling you. Richard handed over documents, real financial reports, but with one crucial modification. He'd inserted deliberate errors, basic mathematical mistakes that any competent CFO would catch immediately, errors that proved Marcus hadn't been reviewing these reports for months, despite signing off on them. Marcus scanned the pages quickly. Too quickly. His eyes didn't linger on the numbers that were wrong by millions. These look fine, Dad. Everything's perfect. The company's in great shape. Thank you, son. I feel so much better knowing you're watching over things with such attention to detail. Marcus didn't notice the hidden camera recording everything from behind the bookshelf, or that one of the documents was actually a resignation letter, pre-signed, dated for today. Marcus had just certified financial fraud as acceptable. He'd also failed to notice his own termination, but Richard was already 3 moves ahead of that game. After Marcus left, Richard sat alone in the silence. The city spread out below him, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. He'd built this empire to leave something meaningful behind. Instead, he'd apparently raised children who saw it as their birthright to claim. His phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. "Daddy, can I stop by tomorrow? I have some ideas about your charitable giving that might help reduce your tax burden." Patricia, who ran a charity that existed primarily on paper. Patricia, who'd been skimming donations from actual charities for 2 years. Patricia, who thought he didn't know about the $340,000 she'd stolen from the Children's Hospital Fund. He texted back, "Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to hear your ideas." The following afternoon, Patricia arrived at the mansion with flowers and a briefcase. Always the perfect daughter when she needed something. She wore the concerned expression she'd perfected over the years, the one that said she was making great sacrifices to care for her aging father. "Dad, Marcus mentioned you're having some trouble with the finances. I hate seeing you worry about numbers." She set the flowers in a crystal vase, arranging them with theatrical care. "Maybe I should help manage your charitable donations. You've always been so generous, but these tax laws are getting so complicated." Richard shuffled to his chair, playing up the elderly confusion. "Oh, Patricia. Yes, the numbers are so difficult now. Sometimes I forget what I've already donated." "Don't worry about any of that." She opened her briefcase, revealing perfectly organized documents. "I'll handle everything through my foundation. You won't have to think about paperwork or tax implications. Just focus on getting well." Patricia didn't know that Richard had discovered her embezzlement pattern. 3 charities, all using the same accounting loophole, all missing funds that went to her personal investment portfolio. She thought she was inheriting his generosity. She was actually walking into a federal crime trap. Richard signed papers giving her temporary control of his charitable giving, papers drafted by his private attorney, papers that included clauses Patricia hadn't read carefully, clauses that made her legally responsible for all donations, clauses that required federal reporting for any administrative fees over $500, clauses that would destroy her the moment she took a single dollar for herself. "Thank you, darling. This takes such a weight off my shoulders." "That's what family is for, Daddy." She kissed his forehead, and for a moment, Richard almost believed she meant it. Dr. Morrison arrived the following Tuesday for the routine evaluation. Richard had researched him thoroughly. Morrison had been paid by 12 different families to declare elderly relatives incompetent over the past 5 years. Each case involved substantial inheritances. Each family had mysteriously contacted Morrison through the same law firm. The same law firm Marcus had used to arrange this evaluation. "Mr. Blackstone, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today." Morrison's voice was professionally warm, but his eyes were already making calculations. "Your son Marcus is concerned about some memory issues you've been experiencing." "Memory issues?" Richard blinked slowly, letting confusion cloud his expression. "I don't. What kind of memory issues? Can you tell me what year it is?" Richard paused, looked out the window as if trying to remember. 1987? Morrison made notes. His pen moved quickly, enthusiastically. I see. And who is the president? Reagan, of course, although I didn't vote for him. Richard added the detail to make the delusion more believable. People with dementia often remembered emotional connections clearly while losing factual accuracy. And what did you have for breakfast this morning? Breakfast? Richard stared at Morrison blankly. Was I supposed to eat breakfast? Morrison's pen moved faster. Every wrong answer was another step toward the competency declaration Marcus wanted. But every wrong answer was also being recorded by hidden devices throughout the room. Every question designed to make Richard look incompetent was being preserved for federal prosecutors. Richard had spent weeks memorizing the perfect wrong answers that suggested cognitive decline without indicating any specific medical condition. Morrison was conducting a fraudulent evaluation, and Richard was giving him exactly the responses he wanted to hear. After an hour of questions, Morrison spoke privately with Marcus in the hallway. Richard listened through a device Emma had installed in the light fixture. At 19, his granddaughter had a better understanding of technology than anyone else in the family. Your father shows clear signs of dementia, Morrison told Marcus. Short-term memory loss, temporal displacement, confusion about basic daily activities. I can file the paperwork tomorrow morning. How long until the hearing? 3 weeks. Judge Harrison is very understanding about these family situations. He knows how difficult it is to watch a parent deteriorate. Richard heard everything. Morrison was falsifying medical records. Marcus was bribing a judge. His children were stealing his life, one legal document at a time. But they had no idea what was coming. That evening, David arrived alone. He seemed nervous, kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting someone to interrupt. David had always been the most anxious of his children, the one who followed rather than led. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, David. What's troubling you? David sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly. Are you really getting worse, or are you pretending? The question caught Richard off guard, not because he wasn't prepared for it, but because it was the first time in months any of his children had asked him something that mattered. Why would I pretend to lose my mind? I don't know, but sometimes your eyes look too sharp, like you're seeing everything even when you're acting confused. David's voice dropped. Marcus and Patricia think you're losing it, but I've been watching you. Sometimes you seem completely normal. This was the moment Richard had been waiting for. The test within the test. David, what would you do if you thought I was pretending? I'd want to know why, and I'd want to help if I could. And if I told you your brother and sister were planning to steal everything I've built? David didn't hesitate. I'd say that sounds like something they would do. Marcus has been acting like the company already belongs to him. Patricia keeps talking about managing the family assets. They never ask how you're feeling, only what you're planning to do with your money. Richard studied his youngest son's face. Fear, not greed. Doubt, not certainty. Worry about doing the right thing, not about getting his share. David was scared, not scheming. Weak, but not evil. Following his siblings because he didn't know how to stand alone, not because he shared their greed. Richard made his decision. David would get a chance to prove himself. Emma knocked on his study door at midnight. She'd been doing this for weeks, visiting after her parents thought she was asleep. Tonight felt different. Grandpa, I know you're awake, and I know you're not sick. Emma, sweetheart, what are you doing here so late? I've been watching everyone, recording conversations, taking pictures of documents. She pulled out her phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. Dad's been falsifying company reports for 8 months. Look at these signatures. The screen showed side-by-side images. Marcus's real signature versus the signatures on financial reports. Close, but not identical. Marcus had been using a signature stamp, signing documents he hadn't read. Aunt Patricia stole $340,000 from the Children's Hospital charity. I have bank records showing transfers to her personal accounts. Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Pride. Pure, unconditional pride in another human being. Uncle David knows about both of them, but he's too scared to stop it. He asked me last week if I thought you were really sick or just pretending. I told him I didn't know. How long have you known I was pretending? Since the 2nd week. You're the smartest person I know, Grandpa. Dementia doesn't make someone forget yesterday while remembering 40-year-old business deals perfectly. Plus, you've been moving money around in your investment accounts. I saw the transaction reports. Emma sat down across from him, her expression serious beyond her 19 years. What are we going to do about them? We, Emma? They're stealing from you, from the family, from charity. Someone has to stop them. Richard leaned back in his chair. What do you think we should do? I think we should let them steal everything, and then take it all back when they think they've won. At 19 years old, Emma understood strategy better than his 45-year-old son. The next morning, Richard called Marcus with an offer that would change everything. Son, I've been thinking about the company. I'm getting too old to make good decisions. Maybe you should be president. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, carefully controlled excitement. That's a big decision, Dad. Are you sure you're ready for that? I'm sure. I want to announce it at tomorrow's board meeting. Marcus didn't know that Richard had spent the previous night transferring key assets, moving intellectual property to shell companies, redirecting major contracts to new entities, closing accounts that Marcus didn't know existed. The company Marcus thought he was inheriting was about to become an empty shell. But Richard had built a new empire overnight. Blackstone Holdings, same management team, same client relationships, same intellectual property, different ownership structure. Within 48 hours, Blackstone Industries' biggest clients received calls from Richard's personal attorney. Mr. Blackstone has decided to start fresh with Blackstone Holdings. Same team, new structure, better management. Will you be joining us? Every major contract shifted to Richard's new company. Marcus woke up president of a company worth $50 million instead of $2.8 billion. He was now running a corporate shell, while his father operated the real business under a different name. The announcement came during the board meeting. Marcus sat at the head of the table, believing he was about to inherit control of an empire. Instead, he learned he'd been managing a sophisticated financial decoy. Effective immediately, Richard's attorney read from prepared documents. All major assets, intellectual property, and client relationships of Blackstone Industries have been transferred to Blackstone Holdings, a privately held company owned entirely by Richard Blackstone. Marcus's face shifted from confusion to anger to pale realization. Dad, what is this? You can't just move assets without board approval. I can when those assets never legally belonged to Blackstone Industries. Check your contracts more carefully, son. You'll find some interesting clauses about intellectual property ownership. But the real trap was just beginning. Patricia discovered the charity set up 3 weeks later, when she tried her first withdrawal. $50,000 for administrative costs. The money should have transferred to her personal account within hours. Instead, federal agents were waiting at the bank when she arrived to confirm the transaction. Patricia Hayes, FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, charity embezzlement, and federal tax evasion. The money she'd tried to steal had been marked by the Treasury Department. Every transaction she'd made had been monitored by federal investigators. The charity she thought she was managing was actually a federal sting operation designed to catch embezzlers. Richard had handed them a perfect criminal, one who'd been building a case against herself for months. When Patricia tried to call for help, she discovered her assets had been frozen. Her charitable foundation's accounts were sealed. Her personal investment portfolio was under federal review. The newspapers called it the charity scam of the decade. Patricia's social standing evaporated overnight. Country club memberships revoked, board positions eliminated, friends who discovered their charity donations had been stolen. But the most devastating blow was personal. Her daughter Emma testified as a witness for the prosecution. The competency hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Marcus arrived early, confident that his father would be declared incompetent and control of what remained of Blackstone Industries would transfer to him legally. The courtroom was packed. Marcus sat with his attorney, reviewing documents that proved his father's mental decline. Patricia attended via video call from county jail, wearing orange instead of designer clothes. David sat alone in the back row, looking miserable. Emma sat in the front row behind her grandfather, a thick folder of documents in her lap. Judge Harrison called the hearing to order. We're here to determine the mental competency of Richard Blackstone, age 72. Dr. Morrison took the stand first, carrying his fraudulent evaluation. In my professional opinion, based on extensive testing, Mr. Blackstone suffers from severe dementia. He shows significant memory loss, temporal confusion, and inability to manage complex financial decisions. Then Richard's real doctor testified. Dr. Sarah Chen had been his physician for 15 years. Your Honour, I've examined Mr. Blackstone monthly for 2 years as part of his regular health maintenance. I performed a complete cognitive evaluation last week. His mental faculties are completely intact. Marcus's attorney jumped up. Your Honour, Dr. Morrison conducted extensive tests over several sessions. His evaluation is thorough and professional. Richard's attorney stood slowly. Your Honour, we'd like to present evidence that Dr. Morrison's evaluation was fraudulent. The screens around the courtroom lit up simultaneously. Video of Marcus lying about financial reports while Richard watched silently. Audio of Patricia planning to steal charity money, recorded during their flower and briefcase conversation. Recordings of Dr. Morrison discussing his fee structure for competency evaluations with other families. Marcus's face went white as he recognized his own voice on the recordings. Dad, you were recording everything. Richard stood up slowly. His voice was strong and clear, nothing like the confused elderly man Dr. Morrison had evaluated. Your Honour, I have been testing my family's loyalty for 6 months. I pretended to have memory problems to see how they would react to my vulnerability. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. 2 of my 3 children failed catastrophically. They saw my apparent weakness as an opportunity to steal everything I built over 47 years. Marcus jumped to his feet. This is manipulation. You made us think you were sick. I made you think nothing, son. I gave you every opportunity to show love instead of greed, concern instead of calculation, family loyalty instead of financial planning. Patricia's voice came through the video screen from jail. This is entrapment. You can't pretend to be incompetent just to test us. I can, and I did. And you proved exactly who you are. You stole from sick children while believing your father was losing his mind. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Mr. Blackstone, you are clearly of sound mind. This hearing is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm referring Dr. Morrison's conduct to the medical board and the district attorney's office." But Richard wasn't finished. Back at the mansion, Richard gathered his family one final time. Marcus sat stiffly, facing criminal charges for falsifying corporate reports. Patricia appeared on video call from county jail, awaiting trial on federal fraud charges. David looked terrified and confused, unsure where he stood. Emma sat proudly beside her grandfather, the folder of evidence still in her hands. "I built this empire for my family," Richard began, "but I learned something important over the past 6 months. Family isn't just blood. Family is loyalty, trust, character, shared values." He looked directly at David. "You get one chance to choose. Take responsibility for your role in this. Help me rebuild what your siblings tried to destroy and earn your place in this family. Or follow them into disgrace." Richard handed David an envelope. Inside was a check for $50 million and a comprehensive business plan. "This is your chance to prove you can build something instead of just inheriting it. The money is yours regardless. What you do with it will determine whether you remain part of this family." David opened the envelope with shaking hands. His voice was barely a whisper. "I choose to stay and work. I want to earn back your trust." Then Richard turned to Emma. "You showed courage when it would have been easier to stay silent, loyalty when it cost you relationships, intelligence when others showed only greed." Emma's envelope contained ownership papers, 40% of Blackstone Holdings, full inheritance rights to the mansion and family investments, legal guardianship if Richard became truly incapacitated in the future, but most importantly, it contained a letter of recommendation to Harvard Business School and a promise of full tuition funding. "You'll be running this company someday, Emma, not because you're family, but because you've earned it." 6 months later, Richard sat in his new corner office at Blackstone Holdings. The building was smaller than the old headquarters, but the view was better. More importantly, the company was worth $3.2 billion, more than the original enterprise. Cleaner management, stronger client relationships, built on trust instead of fear. Marcus was serving 18 months in federal prison for corporate fraud. His gambling debts had been exposed during the investigation, revealing the real reason he'd been so eager to access company funds. Patricia received 3 years for charity embezzlement. Her appeals had been denied. Her daughter, Emma, had refused to visit her in prison. David was learning the business from the ground up. He started in the mailroom, despite holding an MBA. Every day was a chance to prove himself. Some days he succeeded. Some days he failed. But every day he tried. And that was enough for now. Emma had deferred Harvard for 1 year to help establish Blackstone Holdings. She worked directly with Richard, learning strategy and management while finishing her undergraduate degree online. Richard's Dementia Act had revealed everyone's true character: the weak, the greedy, the loyal, and the principled. Like a stress test for the human soul. The grandfather clock in his new office chimed 6 times. Richard had moved it from the mansion study, the same clock he'd bought when Marcus was 2. It represented time, but also persistence, the ability to wait for the right moment. Emma found Richard in his office that evening, reviewing quarterly reports for their newest acquisition. "Grandpa, Do you ever regret testing everyone the way you did? Do you regret finding out who your family really was? No, but it must have hurt to discover Dad and Aunt Patricia's betrayal. Richard closed the reports and looked out at the city lights. Emma, the most expensive lesson you can learn is that family loyalty can't be bought. It can only be earned. He handed her a letter. Your first board meeting is next week, as the new Vice President of Ethics and Development. Emma opened the letter. Inside was her new title, a salary that would make her financially independent, and a note: the final dividend isn't money. It's knowing who deserves your trust. But there was something else in the envelope. A small, brass key. What's this for? The safety deposit box containing my real will. The one that matters. Marcus and Patricia don't know it exists. David doesn't know he's in it. You're the only family member who knows where the real inheritance documents are kept. Richard's mind wandered to his father's words from 50 years ago. He'd been Emma's age then, learning the business, making mistakes, building character through trial and error. Build something worth stealing, the old man had said, and you'll learn who your real friends are. Now Richard understood. His empire wasn't the company. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the buildings or the assets. His empire was the knowledge that one person in his family had chosen loyalty over greed, principle over profit, love over money. Emma had passed the test. She had earned the real inheritance, not the financial wealth, though that would be hers too. The inheritance that mattered, trust. The final dividend, Richard realized, wasn't what you leave behind. It's who deserves to receive it. His phone buzzed with a text message from David. Dad, I finished the Henderson contract proposal. Could you review it before tomorrow's meeting? Richard smiled and texted back. Send it over. I'll take a look tonight. Maybe David would earn his way back into the family after all. Some dividends take longer to pay out than others. Richard's story raises a question that every family with wealth faces. When money and power are involved, who would you trust? Your children who feel entitled to your success? Or the grandchild who protected your values when it would have been easier to stay silent? What would you do if you discovered your family was planning to have you declared incompetent? Would you test their loyalty the way Richard did? Would you trust them without proof, or would you assume the worst and protect yourself first? The final dividend isn't what you leave behind. It's who deserves to receive it. In the comments below, share your thoughts. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty? How do you know who truly deserves your trust?